Okay, imagine this. You're walking through a forest 15,000 years ago. You're hungry. You spot a tree covered in ripe fruit. Perfect. You grab a handful. Except, something's off. The fruit smells sweeter than usual. It's softer, almost bubbling. You eat it anyway. A few minutes later, you feel strange. Your face feels warm. You're laughing at things that aren't funny. Walking suddenly requires a surprising amount of concentration. Congratulations, you just got drunk, without knowing alcohol even existed. Here's the question. Who was the first human to discover alcohol? Was someone trying to invent it? Did they accidentally leave fruit sitting too long? Or did nature invent alcohol millions of years before humans ever showed up? Because the real story is far older, far stranger, and surprisingly inevitable. Let's go. First, we need to clear up one enormous misconception. Humans did not invent alcohol. Yeast did, long before humans existed, long before mammals. Long before dinosaurs disappeared, tiny single-celled fungi called yeast had already mastered fermentation. Here's how it works. Yeast lands on ripe fruit. The fruit contains sugar. The yeast eats the sugar, and as waste. It produces alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's it. No chemistry lab, no barrels, no recipes. Just microscopic organisms doing what they've always done. Nature had been quietly making alcohol for tens of millions of years before the first human ever tasted it, which means alcohol wasn't hidden, it was everywhere. Whenever fruit became overripe, whenever nectar fermented, whenever palm sap collected in warm weather, alcohol appeared automatically. Our ancestors didn't invent it, they stumbled into it. Now imagine being an ancient human. You don't know what fermentation is, you don't know what yeast is, you certainly don't know what ethanol is. You simply find fruit lying on the ground. It smells sweet. It tastes slightly different. You eat it, and suddenly, something very unusual happens. Researchers have actually documented wild animals becoming intoxicated from naturally fermented fruit. Elephants, monkeys, birds, even deer have been observed eating fermented foods. Contrary to popular myths, elephants don't usually become wildly drunk from fermented marula fruit. The math doesn't really work. But many smaller animals absolutely consume naturally fermented fruit containing measurable alcohol. Nature's been hosting accidental drinking parties for a very long time. Humans were simply another guest. But here's the fascinating part. Why didn't evolution stop us from drinking alcohol? Shouldn't poison taste terrible? After all, alcohol can be dangerous. The answer lies in fruit. Ripe fruit naturally contains tiny amounts of alcohol. The sweeter and riper the fruit, the more likely fermentation has begun. For millions of years, primates searching for food may have used the smell of low concentrations of alcohol as a signal. Not a warning, a clue that fruit was ripe, rich in calories, ready to eat. In fact, some scientists have proposed what's called the drunken monkey hypothesis. The idea is surprisingly simple. Our primate ancestors evolved to detect small amounts of ethanol because it helped them locate nutritious fruit hidden in dense forests. Alcohol wasn't originally a drug. It was a food signal. Your nose may still carry that ancient adaptation today. Now here's where everything changes. Finding naturally fermented fruit is one thing. Making alcohol intentionally, that's another. For thousands of years, humans probably encountered alcohol only occasionally. A lucky accident, a warm season, a forgotten pile of fruit. Then agriculture arrived. And suddenly, people had something they'd never possessed before. Surplus, grain, fruit, honey. Food that could sit in containers for days or weeks. And when sugary foods sit long enough, yeast always finds them. Imagine storing crushed grapes inside a clay pot. You come back several days later. The liquid is bubbling. It smells different. You taste it. The effect feels familiar. Someone eventually makes the connection. Leave sweet liquid alone. It changes. Repeat the process. Get the same result. That's one of the biggest discoveries in human history. Not because people wanted alcohol, because people learned how to control fermentation. Archaeologists have found evidence of fermented beverages dating back roughly 9,000 years. One of the oldest known examples comes from ancient China. Inside pottery vessels, researchers discovered chemical traces showing people had mixed rice, honey, and fruit into a fermented drink. Think about that. 9,000 years ago, someone wasn't accidentally getting drunk anymore. Someone was brewing. Now alcohol becomes something entirely different. It stops being an accident. It becomes technology. Then comes beer. People often imagine beer arriving after bread. Ironically, many archaeologists think the opposite might be true. Some researchers have even suggested humans may have begun cultivating grain partly to produce fermented drinks. The evidence is still debated, but what isn't debated is this. Beer appears astonishingly early after farming begins. The oldest known evidence for beer production comes from sites over 13,000 years old, associated with the Natufian culture in the Levant, where residues suggest fermented grain beverages may have been prepared, possibly for rituals or feasts. Imagine gathering enough wild grain, grinding it, adding water, waiting, then discovering the mixture transforms into something completely new. Not bread, not porridge, beer, whether beer came before bread or not. It quickly became one of civilization's favorite inventions. Ancient Egyptians paid workers partly in beer. Mesopotamians wrote drinking songs. The Sumerians even composed hymns celebrating Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. Alcohol wasn't hidden from society. It helped shape society. But perhaps the biggest surprise is that alcohol wasn't originally considered recreation. It was often safer than water. That sounds ridiculous today. For ancient cities, it made perfect sense. Water sources could become contaminated with human waste. Fermentation creates alcohol and lowers pH, making many harmful microbes less likely to survive. Weak beers and fermented drinks were often safer to consume than untreated water. People weren't constantly trying to get drunk. Sometimes they were simply trying not to get sick. Now, here's the biological twist. Not everyone processes alcohol equally. Humans produce an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. Its job is to break down ethanol. Interestingly, genetic evidence suggests this enzyme became dramatically more efficient in our ancestors millions of years ago, long before brewing, long before civilization, long before the first village. Why? Probably because our ancestors were already eating naturally fermented fruit from the forest floor. Evolution quietly prepared humans for alcohol. Thousands of generations before humans learned to manufacture it. Nature solved tomorrow's problem millions of years in advance. And then, human creativity took over. Wine, beer, mead, cider, rice wine, palm wine. Every civilization discovered its own version. Different ingredients, same microscopic yeast. The recipe changed, the biology didn't. So, who discovered alcohol? Probably nobody. Not in the way we imagine. No single genius woke up and invented it. Alcohol had already existed for millions of years. The real discovery wasn't alcohol itself. It was the realization that humans could make it whenever they wanted. That changed everything. The first person who intentionally left fruit, or grain, or honey, to ferment, didn't simply invent a drink. They learned how to harness one of nature's oldest chemical reactions. And from that moment on, alcohol stopped being a random gift from the forest and became part of human civilization itself. The strange part? The next time you smell wine, or beer, or cider, your brain is reacting to the same ancient chemical signal that may once have guided hungry primates toward the ripest fruit in the jungle. You're not smelling modern civilization. You're smelling one of the oldest relationships between humans: yeast and sugar. That evolution ever produced.